So 2 people have died and over 700 have been left homeless after a fire ravaged the Mfuleni informal settlement in Cape Town. The incident occurred during the Easter weekend. According to the city's fire and rescue services, 4 fires were reported in Langa, Mfuleni and Dunoon. Now, lack of proper housing in townships has been pinned as one of the main challenges facing many residents. But can spatial planning help mitigate the occurrence of these fires? Well, to answer that question, we bring in the Acting Executive Director at Ndifuna Ukwazi, Mpho Raboeane. Mpho, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Newzroom Afrika. I mean, firstly, just Ndifuna Ukwazi's work, just to, I suppose, bring our viewers up to scratch with the work that you do and how you've been assisting, particularly when we do see fires in communities like we did over the weekend.
Sure, thank you for having me. So Ndifuna Ukwazi is an NGO, an activist organization and law center, and we advocate for a more equal, spatially just city. And we do this by calling for the provision of affordable, well-located housing. We know that the main challenge for many of these communities is the access to adequate housing, more especially affordable housing in the Cape Town context that's gripped by an affordability crisis as well as a housing crisis. So what we've seen with communities that have suffered the tragedy over the weekend and other communities like them is that these occurrences are actually not peculiar. It's actually perennial. We see there's a cycle between floods and fires in these communities, but there is nothing done proactively to prevent the reoccurrence of this vicious cycle. And this is where spatial planning comes into play, because we know that apartheid spatial planning through apartheid segregationist laws made it so that black poor communities were relegated to the outskirts, to the peripheries of our cities, our urban centers. And in 2024, this has not changed. What we're seeing is that poor communities, the working poor, people seeking opportunity, seeking better education and healthcare, because they cannot afford the housing that's on the private market, and because the state is producing so little housing and also producing this housing on the periphery, we're seeing that people have to put up shelters for themselves on the periphery, leading to overcrowding, leading to the conditions that are prone to these types of disasters like fires, like flooding.
Talk to me about whether or not officials are doing enough to step in, because essentially when you've got these fires, you obviously will get a reactionary response where we're needing to place people and bring aid. But what is it that actually needs to be done from a more proactive point of view? And is there a space that can be allocated to the most vulnerable in the Western Cape?
So this is where the irony comes in, because the Disaster Management Act and the Municipal Disaster Management Plan that is mandated to be had by all municipalities, the city's own plan calls for proactive planning for these vulnerable areas. And the plan actually calls for all departments in the municipality to proactively seek out these high vulnerable areas that are most likely to suffer these types of occurrences or natural disasters, fires, etc. These places or zones are supposed to be planned for proactively, and preventative measures are supposed to be taken once this identification has taken place. And one of the departments that are included in this plan and that are mandated to proactively plan for these types of occurrences and prevent for them as well is the Directorate of Spatial Planning. And this is where we see the lack of investment in infrastructure, but also proper planning to accommodate the numbers of people seeking decent, adequate, affordable housing, as well as where these people are placed in terms of where this housing is made available. Yeah. So the challenge here is that the inner city and surrounds, where there's opportunity, where there are adequate resources and there's proper infrastructure to prevent against these types of occurrences happening, there's not enough space for people to live there, or it's not accessible in terms of the affordability rates. What needs to happen is for more density to happen in the inner city and surrounds, and this density is possible through the provision of affordable housing, through measures like inclusionary housing, through measures like government-provided housing or government-subsidized housing. But this is not happening in the well-located areas of Cape Town.
Give me an example of one of those spaces that you think really can be looked at to provide housing for the poor, and what officials are saying then about that particular site. If you can give me one or two examples.
So the City of Cape Town in 2017 actually released a prospectus of 11 sites in the inner city and surrounds that could be released for social housing. This type of housing is the most accessible type of housing, most affordable type of housing as well. And is a mix between private and public provision. And since 2017 to date, we are yet to see a successful breaking of ground, foundation laid, actually putting up of these social housing institutions on one of these sites. And the challenge there has been initially political will. There was some political challenge posing some sort of slowing down of this process because of the opposition to the idea of bringing the working poor, the urban poor, into these well-located areas like Woodstock, like Salt River. But we encourage now more and more that sites like the Salt River markets are becoming unlocked to provide such housing, and we're hoping that soon we'll be able to see buildings go up and people properly housed. No more fires, no more perennial disasters.
Well, we certainly hope so. But thank you so much for speaking to us. Mpho Raboeane is the Acting Executive Director of the organization Ndifuna Ukwazi.